All right, so today we're going to do multiplying matrices. There's an exploration in your Google Classroom. One rule is when can you do it? So you need to look at that. So I put in the directions that you need to label things. That's the first question. The second question is when you can, how do you do it? Okay, those are the two pieces of information that you're trying to help figure out using your calculator. So you're going to use the button next to the 9. Okay, and there are 4 buttons. I said this in yesterday's meeting or thing. There's like a 2 by 1. There's a 1 by 2. There's a 2 by 2. Okay, these 3 buttons, these are exact matches. Okay, and so if yours isn't any of those things, you're going to push the 3 by 3 button, and then it's going to ask you for your rows and columns. So this is the button for all other matrices. Okay, this is the button for all other matrices. And so you're going to click that, you're going to put it in there, you're going to multiply, and you're going to make it work. This will be on the no calculator part of the test, but we are doing this exploration to try to figure out how it's doing it. I will tell you, I made an answer key for the exploration. I did not use a calculator. So you should be able to do them without calculator. So if you have not done the exploration yet, I would strongly advise it. I'm going to go way over your head if you haven't tried to type these in and take a look at these two things. Okay, when can you multiply? And when you can, how do you multiply? So pause this, open up that sheet, type them in your calculator, see if you can figure out the answers to those questions. Okay, there's directions at the top. Pause and do that. All right, so I finished the exploration. If you didn't pause, you really need to pause because I'm going to put the answers up and that's not really going to help. Okay, so it wanted you, the directions are there. Okay, we're trying to find the 2 rules. When can you multiply? That's our first answer. Let's deal with that first. Okay, if you look at this, a 2 by 2 can multiply with a 2 by 2. Okay, I think I had a couple of them on there. There's this one right here, number 1 and number 12. That works. Okay, and it looks like a 3 by 3 can multiply by a 3 by 3. I think I just did it that one time down here. Okay, so those work. And then if you look at the next one, this one works. I took a 2 by 2 times a 2 by 2. But when I did the exact same, look at example 1. I'm going to use red. And then look at example 2. The numbers were exactly the same, but I couldn't do example 3. Okay, and so if you notice on all of these, hopefully you kind of noticed this. On the ones you could do, these inside numbers were the same. And then I'm going to just use underlining. These outside numbers was what was left over. Okay, these inside numbers were the same. That tells us we can multiply. These numbers are what my answer is going to look like. And that's why I couldn't do this one because those inside numbers were not the same. Okay, if I look at all these ones that don't work, 3 doesn't equal 2. That you're not going to be able to do that one. 1 doesn't equal 3. You're not going to be able to do that. 3 doesn't equal 1. You're not going to be able to do that. So all the ones that didn't work, it was because the columns in the first did not match up with the rows in the second. So it has something to do with rows and columns. Okay, the other piece that I think is important on question 1, like when can you multiply, is if you look at this, these numbers were the same and my answer was a 1 by 1. Okay, same thing here. These were exactly the same problems. I just did them in different orders. So these inside numbers were the same. I did not get the same answer. So multiplication is not commutative. Okay, multiplication, I just, if you look in 4 and 5, that proves it. Those are exactly the same problems. I just flipped the order that I multiplied and I got completely different answers. Okay, so I think this one would help us. When you multiply, so step 2, we know when you can multiply. So now we're looking at step 2. When you are able to multiply, how do you find the numbers that go into the answer matrix? Okay, so I like to start with this number 4. Look at number 4. Okay, how did I get 17? Well, if you look at this, I think if I take 2 times 2, the first times the first, I'm just going to write it up here. If I take the first times the first, I get a negative 4. I'm going to use different colors so you can really see this. A negative 1 times 1 is a negative 1. And then if I do the last one, it's negative 3 times 4. And that's a negative 12. If I combine those all together, I get a negative 17. So it looks like I took the row times the column, each element of the row times each element of the column. Now, when I teach this in the classroom, when I bring this up, a lot of kids are like, yeah, but what happens if there's too many? So just for a second, for the sake of this, I'm going to erase this so you guys can see. Let's say I added one random one here and I made this a 3. Okay, wouldn't the dimensions of the first be a 1 by 3? And wouldn't the dimensions of the second be a 4 by 1? Do the inside numbers match? They don't. So if I added another number, that's taken care of by question 1. You're not going to be able to multiply because the number of elements don't match. So that's not, you can't add a number here. It's not going to work. Okay. So if I follow that, I'm taking row 1. So I'm going to use let's come here to this bright pink. I'm taking row 1 into each of the columns. So when I times it by 2, I get a negative 4. When I times it by a negative 1, I get 2. And when I times it by a negative 3, I get 6. So I took row 1, and that gives me row 1 in my answer by timesing it by each column. Okay, now I'm going to go to row 2. Okay. I took row 2 by 2, and I got 2. I took row 2 by column 2, and I got a negative 1. And I took row 2 by column 3, and I got a negative 3. And that got me the whole answer here. Okay, and then we're going to do the last one. I'm taking this, and I'm going to take it into each of them. So I got 8, that's there. I get a negative 4, that's there. I get a negative 12, that's there, and that takes care of that whole row. So I'm multiplying rows by columns. Okay. Number 6 doesn't work, but number 7 might help you understand this a little bit better. Okay, number 7, if we go back to what we learned at the beginning, this is a 3 and this is a 3, so it works. And my answer is going to be what's left in front. So I'm going to have 1 row, 2 columns. So 1 row, 2 columns. So I'm going to take all of this row and I'm going to multiply it by the first column to get my answer 9. Okay, let's watch what happens. So I'm going to do 4, and then I'm going to move, and I'm going to go over and down. So the first times the first is 4, the second times the second is a negative 1, the third times the third is a positive 6. All together, that's 9. Okay, now I'm going to go back and use a different highlighter here just because this is so hard for kids to understand. Now I'm going to go back to the beginning of this row, and I'm going to multiply it into the second column. So I'm going to take the first times the first, and that's a negative 4. The second times the second, that's a negative 4. And the third times the third, that's a negative 3. Add that all together, and I get a negative 11, which is what I got. So I'm taking the rows by the columns. And I think this is interesting. A couple of years ago, someone brought this up to me. The number you have highlighted here is how many things you're going to add together. So like if I go back up to number 5, my number highlighted was 1. That means I'm not even going to add anything together. Okay. So let's take a look at another one that works. Like let's look at number 11. Okay. And see if we can see that process. 3 and 3, that works. So that means when I add them together, or when I multiply, I'm going to get a 1 by 3, which is what I got. Okay. Since 3 is highlighted, when I multiply, I'm going to get 3 things to add together. Okay, so instead of doing this, I know I just have this one row. I'm going to take that one row into this first column, okay? And I'm going to write the 3 things. First times the first is 4, second times the second is 4, third times the third is 0. So that is how I'm going to get an answer of 8. Okay, now I'm going to take that first row into the second column. Okay, and I'm going to do the first times the first, the second times the second, the third times the third, and that is how I got an answer of 0. And then I'm going to do the first row into the last column. Okay, and I'm going to take the first times the first, that's 6, the second times the second, that's 0, the third times the third is 0. So that's how I got an answer of 6. So I'm multiplying rows by columns. Okay, so let's go back to your notes. Now that we know this, these were some of the ones that were on the exploration. So I was doing those together, kind of talking about it, and we learned from it. Now these are in your notes. So I want you to multiply this by hand. So this is a 2 by 2, and this is a 2 by 2, which means these middle numbers are the same. So this is going to work, and my answer is going to be a 2 by 2 because that's the outside stuff. So I like to make my answer square. I'm going to make it a little bigger because I can, and I write badly. So it's going to be a 2 by 2. Okay, so I'm going to take this pink, and I'm going to take this into this row. The first times the first is 4, the second times the second is 2, so that answer is 6. Okay, now I'm just going to change color so you can see it. I'm going to take the same row into this one. So the first times the first is a -2, the second times the second, sorry, I'm taking it times this. The second times the second is 1, so that's a -1. Okay, now I'm going to start back at the beginning, and I'm going to take the second row into the first column because that would give me this one right here. Okay, and the first times the first is 0, the second times the second is a -6. And then finally, I'm going to take the second row into the second column. The first times the first is 0, the second times the second is a -3. So that is my answer. All right, I would like you to pause, and I would like you to try the second one on your own. Pause and try it. Okay, so this is a 2 by 2. This is a 2 by 1. Those are the same. So my answer is going to be 2 rows, 1 column. It's going to be a 2 by 1. So I'm going to make a cheat sheet. It's kind of in the way. Okay, so you can see it. So I'm going to take the first row into this column. There's only 1 column. So I'm going to go, oh, I did this backward. I said 2 by 1 and I drew. That's, no wonder I'm losing my mind, sorry. 2 rows, 1 column is going to look like that. So the first and the first, oops, please don't not work. That's bad. If that happens, sometimes my filming turns off. Sorry. First times the first is 6. Second times the second is 2. My answer is 8. And now I'm going to take the second row into the first column. First times the first is a -2. Second times the second is a -2. And so my answer is a -4. Okay, try the next one. Pause and try it. This is a 2 by 2. This is a 1 by 2. And those do not match. So this is no solution. Okay, I would like you to try these two. Go. And this is green, so it's not in your notes. So I would just try this on an extra piece of paper. If you've got it, you can move along. Otherwise, I would try it. Okay, this is a 1 by 3. This is a 3 by 1. These are the same, so my answer is a 1 by 1. And I actually think this is the one we did. First times the first, second times the second, third times the third, ends up to be a -17. So this was the one we already talked about. Sorry, I didn't notice that. Okay, we aren't going to do that one then because I think you've got it. All right, I would like you to try these two. Go. Pause and try both of them, and then I'll just go over both of them at the same time. This is a 1 by 3. This is a 2 by 2. These middle numbers are not the same. You cannot multiply. Okay, this is a 1 by 3. This is a 3 by 2. The middle numbers are the same. So I'm going to have 1 row, 2 columns. My answer is going to be a 1 by 2. So first times the first is 4. Second times the second, -1. Third times the third is 6. So that's 3 plus 6 is 9. And then I'm going to do it into the second, start at the beginning. First times the first, second times the second, third times the third is a -11. Now remember, if you're saying, well, what if there's another number? Well, then it would have been knocked out. You wouldn't have been able to do the problem. If there's extra numbers anywhere, then those two things are not going to match. And so that's why you have to start by checking to see if it works. Okay. All right. I would like you to try these two. Pause, try them both. Practice sheet of paper. Go. Okay. This is a 3. Oops. This is a 3 by 3. This is a 3 by 1. This definitely works. My answer is 3 rows, 1 column. So it looks like this. Okay. So I'm going to just write out here to the side when I'm doing first row times this column. First times the first is 4, -1, 0. So this is a 3. Okay. And then I'm going to go to this row into this column. First times the first is 8 plus 2 plus 0. So the answer is 10. And then finally, I'm going to do this one into the beginning. So first times the first is 6 plus 1 plus 0. So my answer is 7. So that's the answer. And you don't have to show work. I just seem like if I have 3 things I'm putting together, I forget signs and I make stupid mistakes. So I kind of write them off to the side like that. Okay, on the next one, this was a 1 by 3. And this is a 3 by 3. So it does work, yes. And your answer is 1 row, 3 columns. It's a 1 by 3. That's what's in front. So you're taking this row into this column to get the first one. So that's going to be 4 plus 4 plus 0. So the answer is 8. And then you're doing that row by this column. And so that's going to be a -2 plus 2 plus 0. So the answer is 0. And then you're taking this last one into that column. So that's 6 plus 0 plus 0. So the answer is 6. Okay, so you're doing rows by columns.